everybody, and welcome back to another episode of For the Love of Marketing. I'm absolutely delighted to have Gabriel Hughes with me today. Absolute attribution genius. I mean, Gabriel, I'll let you talk about your credentials in a moment, but it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast. A little bit of an honor, to be honest, with some of the background that you've got, some of the things you've done in your career, but we'll talk about those in a moment. But we're going to be talking a bit about attribution modeling, marketing mix modeling, and probably touch on GA4 as well, because that's a pretty hot topic right now. But there's a lot going on in this space with changes to cookies and changes to analytics platforms and so much. And it doesn't get the glamorous attention that changes to things like Facebook and LinkedIn get, but and certainly ChatGPT. But it's it's such an important area, such a critical area to understand in marketing. So I'm sure we'll have a really great conversation. But welcome.
Yeah, no, thanks so much for having me, Simon. It's a pleasure to be here. Looking forward to our conversation today. So, let's get stuck in.
Let's go. So tell us a little bit about you first. So your background. Just give us a sort of quick 30-second tour around you, just so people understand who we're talking to here.
Yeah, thank you. Look, I've got 30 years doing data analytics, including a PhD in economics and various roles, etc. The reason why attribution is a thing for me is because I worked at Google some time ago, and in 2011 we patented attribution modeling, and that was a patent that was developed in London with me and a team of some engineers. There's me and another engineer, and Google, unfortunately, on that patent. So that was the multi-touch, attribution and modeling tool where you can compare models. Also came out of that. So it was all about comparing models, and the positional models were all defined in that patent, which was submitted in 2011. And before that, I'd been working on marketing measurement in a number of different contexts, for a company called 24/7 Real Media at one point, also for TNS, Taylor Nelson Softwares at the time, or now Kantar. So across sort of market research and different types of data analysis and product development is really what I'm interested in, sort of data products and developing data products. And in a way, attribution was a data product that we built into Google Analytics at the time, and then across Google's other platforms. So since then, I've done some other senior roles in other corporations. I worked briefly for Elsevier as a SVP, running a whole analytics capability for a big science publisher. And then around 8 years ago, created Better Genie, which is a boutique custom attribution and marketing measurement firm. We mainly do attribution and market mix modeling, as well as propensity modeling, predictive modeling, and customer analytics. So all over, measuring the customer journey, essentially. It's been my life.
Well, let's pick some of that stuff out of your brain. That's a real tour. So I mean, let's start with the basics and build from there, right? So to begin with, what is attribution modeling? Let's cover that one off.
Well, I want to say that the most important part when you talk about attribution modeling is actually the modeling, not the attribution, which might sound a bit odd, but essentially what you're trying to do is just another version of understanding the relationship between your marketing activity and your sales and your conversion activity. So while attribution modeling has come to mean specifically valuing each touch point in a user journey to sale and finding out a methodology that values each touch point, the bigger picture is, what you're trying to do is, as I say, measure marketing in a multi-channel, multi-touch world where people are, interacting and are exposed to ads across multiple channels. And that's a problem that sort of predates attribution modeling, predates the internet even. So really it's one methodology in the toolkit. And the reason why I say the model bit is almost more important is because I don't think we should get hamstrung by particular methodology. I think we should get more focused on the problem we're trying to solve. So, if you decide to do some multi-touch rule-based attribution model, but then you also factor in some kind of rule that says, and for every online sale, we get so many offline sales, or when the interactions happen on a mobile device, we think they're worth more, but even though people are less likely to convert on their mobile for us. So anything you do to sort of, change that method, as long as it's evidence-based and you're building up a kind of model of how your customers convert, then, you're doing some kind of attribution model. Then, of course, the other thing that is now everyone's doing in one way or another, is data-driven attribution. So this is the idea that that puzzle of what each touch point is worth can be solved by some kind of methodology, whether that's an AI methodology, machine learning, statistical, but some sort of methodology that answers the question for you instead of you having to puzzle out what each touch point is worth.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So, I mean, that's an interesting point because it has evolved quite a lot over the years, and I mean, you can't, to be honest, fortunately and unfortunately, you can't really have a conversation in marketing right now without the word AI come up, right? Without
No,
that,
right. Yeah, yeah.
dreaded two letters, right? They come up in every single conversation I'm having at the moment, which, as I say, is a good thing,
It's
but
just
also
throwing in the the AI hand grenade.
yeah, exactly, right. It's disrupting everything, and
Yeah,
in many ways in a good way, in some ways in a bad way, but in all instances in a bit of a scary way, to be honest with you. But
right.
um,
Yeah,
how do you find attributions working now? Because as you say, if we rewind 10 years, it was a real hot topic. Everyone was certainly focused on trying to build out the attribution models for their businesses. I think it's been less of a hot topic. It's still been absolutely critical, but less of a hot topic, if you like,
no,
over the
totally.
last sort of few
Yeah,
years. But it's evolved significantly, and it will continue to evolve, as you say, with AI and various other topics. But I mean, how do you think it's changed over the last few years to what attribution modeling is now to those that maybe touched on it 5, 6, 10 years ago and haven't touched on it recently?
yeah. I mean, when you talk to people about attribution, you get two different sort of types of message. You get, on the one hand, you get messages around it's critical. Like they're, you're spending a huge amount of money on marketing. You're multi-channel, and you're genuinely groping around in the dark. You don't know what it's worth. So the attribution puzzle, the problem of attribution, the need is as big as ever, and if anything, it's bigger. With just more complex types of engagement and more platforms and the whole growth of social and everything that's done, so that you've just got all these different. So most large brands have got to think about. They've got to think about search, but they've got to think about organic search. They've got to think about affiliate. They've got to think about email. They've got to think about display. They've got to think about video, and then social, and then all the different channels and how does all that work. So the need is there. But then the other thing you get is kind of like, but it's complicated, or another common thing you hear is, oh, we tried an attribution project about 10 years ago and it didn't really work. This is where people have tried to do it themselves. So people need simple solutions, and just at a time when it's got more complicated. I mean, to answer your question, the main changes are, well, there's a hell of a lot of out of the box, sort of off the shelf, if you like, attribution platforms that claim to solve it for you. They all claim to be accurate. They all claim to be data driven. Most of them do anyway. A lot of them claim that they do things like incrementality, or they have a sort of niche that they fall into of, this is what we do that's special. So we always talk about custom in our case, as in it's adapted to each brand, right? So, but there's a lot of options to go and take off the shelf attribution. The other thing, that, of course, that you have to talk about is what's happened with cookies, which I know we're going to come to, which is where, tracking the passive touch points, as we call them, when you simply view, a post or you view a video, but you don't interact with it, that is not trackable. So attribution in the sense of tracking and measuring each touch point is now harder than ever. To be honest, it was never particularly good, that kind of tracking with third-party cookies, to be honest. There were always issues about multiple devices and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
So that's a big thing. So there are lots of off-the-shelf solutions, but there's a bigger measurement problem. And I think advertisers are as confused as ever. There's been a bit of a shift recently into more emphasis on market mix modeling as a solution. It's not attribution, but to my mind, as I said earlier, I think it's better to think in terms of the problem you're trying to solve. And MMM is an attribution method, in my view. It's solving the same kind of problem, just using different data in a different way. Lots more I could say, but they're the big shifts.
Well, I mean, he picks on two really important points there. Well, one around the cookies, which we talk about quite a lot because it's a real hot topic, and it has and will continue to significantly shift the digital marketers landscape over the next year or two. And then marketing mix modeling, which is really is well, it's older, right? It's much older than attribution,
Yeah.
but coming back exactly because of that challenge. So let's touch on those quickly. So obviously, I think I don't think we need to talk into exactly what's going on with third-party cookies. I think I've talked about that quite a lot on my blogs and previous podcasts. So anyone listening who wants to read up on that, go back and find that information rather than talking about it now. But obviously, significant shifts going on there. With those sort of privacy considerations and third-party cookies disappearing, what can we do with attribution? I mean, does that kill it, or can we adapt?
Yeah, I don't think it does. I mean, it forces you to depend on first-party data, and I'm sure you talked about the rise of first-party data. So it becomes about first-party data. So it's like, how do I attribute using my own data? It's another reason why we've seen increased demand for sort of custom approaches, because it's like, well, we're not going to give you our tracking. It's going to be your data that we're going to try to attribute to. You can still do the problem, and the attribution approach of looking at the path, the customer path of the multiple touch points prior to a sale and assigning credit, that classic sort of attribution view. You can do that using the first party data. You can only really reliably do it for the clicks. You can't do it for the impressions. You can't do it for the views, for the, and just the data just isn't there. It's in the walled gardens of each individual platform. And besides, if the user doesn't actually directly engage with it there, and then if they don't click through to your site or to your app, well, then you can't see them in your first party data. So you need another way. And given the importance of those upper funnel and mid funnel kind of channels, then it's the reason why a lot of people are turning away from just pure attribution into some other methods to try to understand what they can do. Now, having said that, there are ways of incorporating those impressions into the user journey. To cut a long story short, we have a particular statistical approach where essentially we're reconciling different measurement methodologies into a single view, just because we like the tactical, granular, ROI measurement that you get from that up close attribution. But these days, and linking back to the MMM point, as a marketer, you are forced to look at multiple methodologies. There are three big methodologies, by the way. We mentioned attribution and MMM. The other one, of course, is uplift testing and incrementality testing and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Good. So, I mean, look, that's a good point. Let's. You're very good at segueing, Gabe. This is brilliant.
I'm a segwayer. Everything's a segue for me, and there are paths going off into many directions. Is the trouble?
Yeah.
Well,
We're
I think
the right one.
this is enough. Maybe I'm just egging for a second, third, fourth podcast on this subject. I could talk about it all day, Simon.
Yeah, well, that's it, right? I mean, it's such a massive area of marketing. And I've had a couple of guests that have come back more than once because we have a conversation and we realize we've touched 10% of what we really want to talk about, but we don't want to bore our listeners by just sitting here and talking for 4 hours on one episode of a podcast. So
we don't have to segue. If you've got, if you want to go back, we can.
Yeah, well, let's see where we go.
Yeah.
So, but you mentioned marketing mix modeling again there, which is good. So I think there's a lot of people who will be of the younger generations who have only ever worked with attribution, no idea what this MMM thing is. Do you want to just explain what marketing mix modeling is, how it differs to attribution, and we've talked about why we need it now because we don't have access to everything we had before with attribution, but just give a bit of a sort of a 101 on that for our listeners.
Yeah, it's a lot more of it. We used to say, like one way I heard it described, which I quite like, is that if attribution is a ground level view of what's going on, MMM is a bird's eye view of what's going on. One of the reasons why it hasn't gone away is because it's the way in which you measure offline marketing in combination with digital. So if you are doing print or TV or other stuff, then you kind of need it in the mix. And then also on the other side of it, what if you've got high street stores, which not everything's click and collect, and you're trying to understand those relationships. So it's a statistical modeling technique. It's generally looks over time, over quite long time frames. It tends to look at what is sometimes called big buckets, so big categories of activity. So it's not going to give you, each individual affiliate and each individual, campaign in your search that you get with attribution. Instead, it's going to give you the whole category of search and the whole category of, particular like paid social, one channel in a sense. Because what you're trying to do with it is essentially model the business. So you have this notion in MMM of like a baseline, which is underlying sales of like, so you're looking often at economic factors or competitor activity, other things that drive the business. The big challenge for MMM in the last few years has been how to model COVID's impact on sales,
Yeah.
because you need several years of data. So you get several years of data and you look at these big channel level activities, and then you model the relationship between them using essentially econometric techniques, which are sort of line of best fit techniques. So it's what you're trying to do is typically predict total sales from a combination of marketing and economic and business drivers over time. And you're looking for a line of best fit. In other words, when you predict that sale value, you want that prediction to be as close as possible to the actual sales value. It's easy to do badly. It's actually quite a specialist statistical skill.
Mm.
There's been a bit of a trend for sort of people to sort of open source econometric packages, and you can just do it like this. What I would say is, by all means, have a go. If you don't have a mathematical and statistical background, be very, very cautious and get involved with someone who has. And secondly, try different models out, because what you're going to find is that your estimates are going to move all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
And the fit isn't enough as a diagnostic. There are other ways of establishing whether it's a valid model or not. So one of the challenges with MMM, just to jump onto that, and sorry to segue again, is you can do this business of modeling big channel level relationships, between business drivers, channels, and sales, but you're going to get a range of different answers unless you really know what you're doing. But done well, you can get these really nice estimations of kind of like, the potential upside of increasing activity in a particular channel. It's really good for sort of media planning. It tends to be done on a quarterly basis. The attribution tends to be like every day it's updated, whereas your MMM tends to be like, could be just once a year. Typically, though, it's quarterly.
Yep.
And it's used, it's conversations with the CFO. It's long-term budget planning. It's the big numbers as well. It's, do we spend $1 million more on paid search or not? It's not these micro optimizations that you get with attribution.
Yeah, I mean, early in my career, I mean, digital was around, although we didn't call it digital right back at the beginning. But early in my career, I was doing a lot of press and TV and radio for a few businesses that had fairly big brands that had high street presence, and we needed to go out mass, and the marketing mix modeling was absolutely critical then to predicting what campaigns we were going to run and how and when and what product we were going to push. And it's a great methodology to understand. So I definitely recommend anyone who's running any sort of campaigns at the moment or planning them and doesn't understand marketing mix modeling, have a read up on that. Maybe we'll do a piece specifically on this as well coming up soon. But something really, really critical to understand in the current environment. If you look at the changes at the moment, I mean, looping back to sort of attribution. I think a lot of people when they do attribution can be, I don't mean this in any way offensively to anyone, but a little bit lazy and just jump into the sort of last click model. Which is easy and understandable. But the one question I often get from people, have done many, many times over the years, is, so what is the right model then? When they're thinking about, you go into Google Analytics, and this is where people are getting most of their knowledge from, where you've got the last click and you've got sort of evenly weighted and the sort of first interaction, and there's various different models. Which one is the right model? Now, I know the answer isn't, well, this is the right model, everybody use that one. But what's your sort of, I mean, you must get asked that, I guess.
No, it used to be the big question. So, so much to say about this. So,
I thought you might have.
Right. First of all, what's wrong with last click? Which I thought is what you might say. What's wrong with last click anyway? We like last click. It's easy, I mean, pure performance, first of all. If you're going down the last click route, you are acknowledging that you're only measuring the very end of the funnel, and therefore you're kind of acknowledging that you're ignoring the upper funnel, you're ignoring brand building, you're ignoring all of that end of the spectrum. But there is this bit in between which attribution tries to get to. People go, in the end, you're trying to model a psychological process of a purchase decision. So people go through this decision-making process, and they go, "Oh, I'm not sure whether I'm going to buy, whatever. I'm not sure I'm going to buy a pair of shoes from Shoe. Shoe is one of our clients. So I'm not sure if I'm going to do this. So I'm going to search around. Actually, Jimmy Choo is a classier one. I'm not sure if I'm going to buy those Jimmy Choos or not. They're another one of our clients. Jimmy Choo. We don't only do footwear, folks. Just so you know. I'm not sure. So I'm going to shop around. I'm going to look at the alternatives, and you go through a process of, you're possibly aware of these brands, but you haven't committed to a particular product or even to buy from that particular brand. And so you're online, and you might be searching, you might be exposed to things, you might be looking at deals, and you're going through a process of research, consideration, you're making up your mind, and then eventually you make up your mind and you purchase something, right? Now, last click is guaranteed to be the last thing in that process by definition. And so it's the touch point that is most likely to capture what happens after you've made up your mind, right? You start from not knowing what you want to knowing what you want. So by catching it at the end, you're catching it at the last moment when you've lost the opportunity to influence what's happened before. You want to influence people before they've made the decision, not after they've made the decision. So that's what's wrong with last click.
Yeah.
Now, it's interesting you say, oh, there's all these different models that are available. Well, those positional models, I'm sorry, guys, but with GA4, poof.
Yeah.
Right? They've gone. We've now got data-driven attribution and last click as the two alternatives. That's it. And by the way, Google's data-driven attribution, which would seem to be the answer to your question, oh, what's the model? Well, definitely use it in place of last click if you can't do anything else. Just so you know, Google DDA, and I believe this is true, having looked at documentation, it's very murky how it works. They don't say a lot about it, but it's Google's channels. I believe it's the last 4 touch points only that are evaluated. Okay. The method's a bit mysterious, and they don't have an objective measure of accuracy. So a lot of data-driven approaches just claim to be data-driven, but you don't know whether they're accurate or not. So the idea that we have, and there aren't very many companies doing this, is sort of like, if you can predict the sale from the touch points, then you're able to make an evaluation of how accurate it is by then predicting some other data that you haven't seen before from the touch points. And therefore, the more accurate you can predict, the better the model is. And so you have this way of benchmarking whether the model is accurate or not. Okay. So that would be what I would say. The most accurate model is the best one. Of course, it's never perfect. You need to be aware that the data going in isn't perfect. You need to be aware that you're missing out on certain touch points, the big ones being the impressions, where you need another approach to model those. So it's the one that best represents then the true journey that your customers are going through, and you want to find objective ways to measure it. One of the challenges with attribution was always, there's all these different models, what do they show? And it's kind of like a hall of mirrors, Okay, I've given up on last click, but now I've got a huge can of worms. I don't know what the answer is. Help, I'm lost. And it's one of the reasons why people get put off by it, frankly. It's all too complicated, But one of the intuitions behind the old model comparison tool, and one of the things I would encourage people to do, is compare models. Because it's by comparing them, you can kind of get some insight there into what's going on. In fact, those models were developed not to solve the attribution problem, because back then we couldn't. There was no data-driven. We knew it was something we wanted to do, but we hadn't worked out how to do it. No, those models were created to allow you to just understand and measure and summarize the customer journey. So if, for example, you are trying to acquire new customers, then I think it's really important to look at the first touch, the first touch point, because that's the very first time that person has interacted with you. So that's a really important touch point, and you want that touch point to happen. And it's arguably far more important than the last touch point where they actually convert. So, it has to come with an understanding of the user journey, an understanding of the bigger problem you're trying to solve. But in the end, it's going to be about, I think, actual technical accuracy, with all the caveats that I've given you about that.
No, that's good. That's good. Great. Yeah. So I think the last thing I was going to talk to you about was GA4. So, but I think we've probably touched on that there enough. So that's probably fine. So I guess to round off, there's so much valuable stuff in there, Gabriel. It's brilliant. But if someone was just starting out right now and just saying, look, or even not just starting out, just saying that what does my attribution strategy need to be going forward? What are the sort of top 2-3 things they really need to be looking at? Sorry, throw this one at you, but
that's fine. Yeah,
the sort of key things they need to be really thinking about right now to get
it
this right.
depends. Yeah, it depends where they are. Look,
Yeah.
I think you need a single measure. I think you do need to join everything up. Even your branding and performance. At the end of the day, yes, they're different, but you're solving the same long-term problem of sales and ROI. So, what is your ROI target? At the end of the day, this has to be. But the whole point of attribution is to help you make smarter decisions to move budget from low ROI to high ROI activities. But to do that properly, you need to measure ROI across the whole funnel. So, I don't know, start thinking about the whole funnel. Start thinking about how you measure the whole funnel. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good. It's going to be, your overall model is going to end up being actually multiple methods. I'd much rather you put some estimates in a spreadsheet that you at least could say, these are the assumptions we're making, right? Than you just went like that and just threw money at it, like a lot of people do, or go, oh, we'll just stick to last click. Because, at least you're moving in the direction of trying to understand, be explicit about your assumptions. And then eventually, obviously, what you want to do is validate, measure those assumptions, bring them all together, have a framework for measurement, you have an attribution methodology that you believe in. And you can do all of these things. You can do MMM. It's not an either or. You can do MMM, attribution, incrementality testing. I'm afraid it's quite a big effort. So therefore, prioritize around what decisions are you trying to make with it.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. That's great advice. I think, as with anything in digital marketing, we should all be testing all the time. And the way to test, of course, is, as you say, to start with a hypothesis and then see where that leads you, right? To
lean analytics, exactly. Yeah. Test and learn. It's valid. It's the right approach. And it's about people. It's not just about getting a technology platform and plugging it in. It's about having the right team, bringing all your data together. It can be complex, but it's. To give up is not an option. You have to measure. You're implicitly measuring, and making those attribution decisions. So if you're doing that implicitly, better to be explicit, better to actually make an effort.
Yeah, 100%. So Gabriel, I don't think you actually plugged your business at all. So go on, tell us if people have got more information.
That's really I should have done. I'm not a salesperson. I'm a Metagenie person. We are Metagenie, Metageni, Metagenie.com. Been around for 8 years. We do entirely custom, so it's bespoke to your business. So it's all around your business goals. So essentially, if we're going to do attribution, we're going to break out the attribution for your different customer groups, for your different products, around your own ROI metrics, around your channels, your strategy, your first-party data. It's AI predictive analytics, so we are predicting the sale from the journey. We also do MMM. We also do holistic attribution, which is link it all together. We also support incrementality testing. So basically, the whole enchilada around will come on a journey with you to help you build out a custom solution for you. Because we're quite custom, we tend to work with big enterprise clients. I mentioned Jimmy Choo and Shoe already. In the non-footwear area, we have Toolstation, major tool supplier. We've worked with AO.com for a very long time, done a lot of great work with them. To name but a few. You can look on our website and see some of our other case
I love
studies.
the idea that your business has been to shoes and non-shoes.
No, not at all. Actually, travel's a really important sector, as it always has been in attribution. So we currently work with Aways, Home Seasons, Cottages.com. We've done work in the past for Love Holidays, very successful work with them. Nice. So travel's another big area for us. But it tends to be the larger companies with a complex attribution problem that really need help to build a custom solution that tend to work with us.
Good. Okay, great. Nicely done. All right, lovely. Well, look, thanks everyone. Thanks for listening. Lots of great stuff in there.
See you all. Take care.
Yeah, brilliant. Right. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more great stuff. And we'll see you on the next episode of For the Love of Marketing. Cheers, guys.